And welcome to The Outsiders. I am Josh Gross, joined as always by Jeff Sherwood. Thank you all for tuning in. If you are tuning in, obviously there are many more important things in the world to do and be focused on than this show, but we hopefully will give you a little distraction here from what's going on. There's so much happening. And yet the fights turn on, Jeff, another weekend of mixed martial arts to look back on, another week to look forward to, and lots of issues in the sport this week. First of all, before we get started, what shirt are you wearing this week? Because your MTV shirt was a big hit with people. I noticed, there's something going on, Ultimate Fighting. Tell us about your shirt, Jeff.
It's a Ultimate Fighting Championship 1. So I don't want to show my belly.
No, show your belly. That's half the reason I'm asking.
Yeah, you know what's funny? I have no idea where I got this shirt. So, and there's a lot of shirts in my closet that.
How old is it?
I don't know. Years. Like 10 probably. I don't know. And I never wore it. Like it was just sitting in my closet, and my fiance always gets mad because I have an entire walk-in closet just full of t-shirts.
Wait, fiance, did we know that?
Yeah. Well, maybe you didn't because it was on Facebook.
I only knew like girlfriend. I didn't fiance. When did that happen?
About a year ago.
Oh, what the hell?
Yeah.
Have you not told me?
I guess maybe not. Maybe I just automatically assumed, but you're not on Facebook.
No.
So,
I'm not on Facebook.
Yeah, it's been with what's going on in the world. Like, yeah, okay. I asked her to marry me. She said yes, of course, because I'm a prize. And
you're a catch, man.
But we haven't planned anything. With COVID-19, she started some crafts and things that she wanted, but man, how long is this shit going to last? She's at the point now, she's like, are we ever going to be able to get married? And I was like,
yes, you will be at some point, but it's going to be a while.
Yeah.
It's going to be a while.
Even Vegas was shut down because at one point she's like, let's just go to Vegas.
Can't you just go like to the local courthouse or?
Yeah, you can, but she's got a dress. So, you're not going to wear like a wedding dress to the courthouse. That would be kind of lame.
Why not?
But I was all for Vegas and Elvis and, all that, but she's not even up for the Elvis gig. So,
well, congratulations. I feel like you must have told me that, and I forgot one of your.
I probably did, but yeah, I don't know.
Right.
I was finally able to afford a nice ring, so I was like, let's do it. So,
well, that's nice. And she clearly doesn't mind all the fights that you watch and will watch in your life. This is okay.
Some weekends now that we're kind of locked down, she doesn't mind it as much. But if like everything was open, she probably would because, once I stopped working at SureDog, it was nice that we were able to go places on weekends and do things. And, I wasn't tied down every Saturday of the year. And, so, there are times when she's like, fights again. Like when I did live radio with you the other night after the UFC, she's like, I thought this shit wasn't going to happen anymore. I was like, wow.
I'm the bad. I can be the bad guy. I have no problem being the bad guy.
I did blame it on you.
That's
so,
fine.
And it
for the subscribers, man, for the people,
Right.
We got things to discuss.
And when we do it, we're not here for hours.
Right.
We get in and we get out.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Half-hour live show, and then we're trying to do the best we can. We won't be too long on this one, although we have a lot to discuss. Hopefully, she didn't get mad at you this weekend because there was fights Saturday and Friday night. Of course, we talked a lot last week about the light heavyweight division and the potential of Ryan Bader and Vadim Nemkov and what that meant in the wake of John Jones giving up his title. New champion in Bellator. Vadim Nemkov really took it to Ryan Bader, emphatically took that title and put his stamp on that belt. Went back to Russia, big celebration. I think it's just the beginning of a conversation in that weight class that's going to persist about who's number one, who's the best, how does that shake out? And it was interesting because this week seemed to revolve around a lot of those discussions. Fighters in multiple promotions, even the UFC, we're talking about, hey, I want to fight this guy. I want to fight this guy. Like, let's get it done. What do you make of now just sort of the light heavyweight discussion? Because we have some fights to look forward to this weekend that will lend itself to like, well, how does this thing shake out now with John Jones? First thing first on Bader and Nemkov. I don't think it was the result a lot of people expected, although if you thought that Vadim Nemkov had no real shot coming into that, you had not paid attention. And so he puts down Ryan Bader. The thing that I missed, Jeff, is that throughout the entire broadcast, we kept getting shots of Bader's family in Arizona. And I was like, if he goes down in a bad way, are they going to show them again? Or is it just like we only get the celebration? We only got the celebration, the happy sort of shot. This is the sort of inherent dishonesty of what we get on broadcast sometimes. No cutaway back to Arizona when Nemkov gets his hand raised. First things first, how did you feel about that win for Nemkov? What does that mean for Bader, who still now holds the heavyweight title? And, what do you think about Nemkov's chances against other known light heavyweights out there?
I'm wondering how that's going to work. I'm wondering if Bader's going to want a rematch. Even though Nemkov won handedly, I would think that Bader probably wants another shot at him and have a better showing. I mean, we talked Bader up last week. So I mean that's nothing but good for Nemkov. We can't just say, Ryan Bader, he wasn't as good as we thought he is. I still think he's that good. But now Nemkov's there. So he's in all the discussions now. So, but I'm thinking Bader might want a rematch. So we'll see how that works out. But speaking of the family aspect and everything, that it reminded me of when Chad Mendez fought Jose Aldo. They rented out a place here at the Hanford Fair and had a big TV in there, and you had to buy tickets and everything. And it was like a big ordeal. Obviously Chad was from Hanford, his whole family was there and everything. And we all know how that fight ended up. And, you could hear a pin drop when the end of the fight happened. But it's kind of strange when you get reactions like that. You don't really know what to do. But his parents were there and they were cool about the whole thing. And it was a cool little gig. Gave a lot of things away. I donated a bunch of Sherdog stuff at the time and they auctioned them off and gave a bunch of stuff away. So, it's hard when people are in that situation. If you're on the losing end of it, it's hard for the camera guys too. Like, okay, what do we do? What do we do now?
I get it. If you're going to keep going back to the family, you got to show them after the fight one way or another. Just it's always that sort of missing piece on MMA broadcast. It's not a big deal. It's something I noticed. People aren't going to give 2 seconds thought to it. Obviously, the story is Vadim Nemkov coming out of that and Bader going down in the way that he did. I don't think that automatically means that Ryan Bader somehow isn't the fighter that we talked about. It means that Vadim Nemkov is a guy who's coming into his prime. He's got a ton of talent. And I think he fits right into that really sort of deep light heavyweight division that now has a ton of parity, right? The loss to Yuri Prochaska stands out huge. They fought in Ryzen, and that one sort of lingers. He had his moments in that. There's something about Nemkov about fading in fights. But if he gets going and hurts you early, dangerous dude, no question about it. That Bellator card, I think, really felt mostly about the main event. There were some other contests on there that people were paying attention to. Any thoughts before we move on to that Frankie Edgar, Pedro Munoz decision that a lot of people were discussing as well?
No, it was a lot like the UFC card. So, it was ran or by the main event. Julia Budd looked good coming back from her loss. Roy Nelson
looked okay.
Yeah. But and then Roy Nelson and you're kind of wondering, what's up for Roy. So
He
other than that,
wants one more with Matt Mitrione, man. That's what he wants. That's what he said. I mean,
yeah.
like,
Would you
like that, right? We were talking about sort of the different type of fighters coming over from the UFC to Bellator. And Roy is one of these guys who came over, was already way on the downside of his career. I guess he brought a little credibility for a division that didn't have a lot. But with that, there's no doubt the guy like that brings a reputation of like, oh, this Bellator is where old UFC guys go to,
right.
Just graze, right, out to pasture.
Right.
Not because I'm talking big country. It's just sort of like it's sort of like retirement, but not so much.
Yeah.
And I think there's nothing left for him to do. But he's made quite a lot of money and extended his career because of Bellator. I don't know that they've gotten much as far as a return, and I don't know what a Mitrione fight does if anybody cares. But more power to him to get paid. But I think Bellator's kind of attraction of those kinds of fighters has to end. And perhaps they've developed enough depth now on their own where they don't have to include those kinds of fighters.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you don't want it to start getting to where Bellator signs all the guys that are kind of done coming into the organization.
But that's already the reputation. I mean, that's already sort of baked in. They have to get away from that because they've been doing that,
Well, with guys like Nemkov, rising to the top, that's definitely a feather in their hat.
We'll see him. He has fought Phil Davis, and now he's fought Ryan Bader. So if they want to give him Corey Anderson right away, that makes sense to me. The fight with Phil Davis was very close. If you want to do the Phil Davis, Lyoto Machida winner, there's a lot of different ways you can go. And like you referenced, perhaps a rematch with Bader. But I think maybe you move on from that Bader fight. Maybe. I mean, I'm not sure that's the most attractive fight at this point. The UFC was on Saturday night, headlined by Frankie Edgar's debut at 135 against Pedro Munoz. Very tight fight, very good fight. I thought even though Edgar won a split decision that a lot of people thought he didn't deserve, that he walks away from the fight looking good. So does Munoz. It was like one of those rare contests where you get both fighters looking pretty good. Lots of different ways you could spin it in the end. A decision for Frankie. Did you agree with that? 48-47 twice for Edgar, 49-46 for Munoz. How did you see it, Jeff Sherwood?
I was watching it and I wasn't like keeping track of the rounds. I was just kind of watching it for enjoyment. And I was happy to see that Frankie looked kind of like his old self. I thought maybe he was starting to slow down a little bit, but it didn't look like it in this fight. And I felt at the end of the fight, it was probably going to be a split decision because the fight was that close. So it wasn't anything where I was like, oh my gosh, Frankie won. That's horrible. I saw a lot of people saying that. I saw a lot of people, saying Munoz won big, but I thought it was close. It was close. Lots of rounds were close, and it seemed like the perfect fight to come out as a split decision for whoever. I mean, I couldn't make a strong argument, I don't think, for either one that they definitely won. I think you could kind of make an argument for both, but it's not something you would be passionate for and be like, this, and this is why he won. It's like, it was a close fight. Either one could have won.
Right. Very competitive fight, close fight. I favored Munoz. I thought Munoz won 3-2, 4-1, debatable, but I thought he did enough. His output was enough. He damaged Edgar enough. He landed the harder shots. All things considered, like I said, it's a fight where I think both fighters walk away better off for, although Edgar, gets that with the W next to his name, sort of jumps right into the 135 mix. That's a tremendous division, and Munoz is good enough to still exist there. Other fights on the card, Jeff, again, you sort of reference it like that Bellator event where most of the focus was the main. Anything grab your attention? Anything stand out to you?
Not really. It definitely seemed like a card that, especially for me, I'll watch the main event, especially since there was fights on Friday and Saturday. I'll watch the main event of both, and I'll look at reactions of certain fights. And if people are really talking about one fight, I'll go back and and check that out, and check out a couple people that are kind of on a list of people to watch. But other than that, I really don't think either card was one of those cards that you sit down at 3:30 or 4 o'clock or whenever and watch it from start to finish live.
I will say for me, I watched more of the Bellator event, saw more of the undercard, and there were some good performances on there, some names people should be aware of. Saw less of the UFC, focused more on the main event. But yeah, I think it's card specific. This card coming up this weekend for the UFC, more depth, I think, more reason to watch, put in more hours on it. One of the big discussions sort of coming out, I think it was engineered some around the light heavyweight division discussion, but also now it seems like among other weight classes. ESPN put up this tweet. I wrote a column for Sherdog. People were sort of talking about it. Fighters were bringing up like this idea of, regardless of the promoter, you kind of just sort of talking names, matchups, fighters versus fighters, right? And most of the discussions around, UFC versus Bellator or whatever, so these promotional dynamics that we are so baked in that we think about in a big way. But I think it's kind of neat, and the discussion has never gone away fully. That people recognize from time to time that it makes sense to talk about these kinds of matchups, regardless of promotions and what they may mean. If there's one fight out there to make that the promoters can't get in the way of, that the brand doesn't matter, we're just talking fighter A versus fighter B. Is there one fight out there that you would like to see?
I mean, the Bader-Stipe fight, I'm interested in that. I mean, obviously it loses a little luster because of what happened this past weekend. But there's always good fights. I mean, we've always had this discussion over the years, I mean, it used to be Pride versus UFC, right? We take the Pride champions and the UFC champions and let them fight. That would have been the dream thing. When Chuck went over there, that was a big deal, because things like that just didn't happen. And I think it's even less of a chance to happen now, but it's definitely good. It's definitely good to talk about. I mean, there's still lots of guys, and he's fought a lot of guys, but Gegard Mousasi, I would like to see him fight a lot of the UFC guys, and he has fought a lot of the UFC guys because he spent a lot of time there. But yeah, I still feel Gegard's still one of the top fighters in his weight class in the world.
Yeah, I tweeted out because Dana White, was asked this, sort of talked about a little about, what do you think about Bellator fighters? They're chiming in. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And he was playing because Scott Coker was talking about how the light heavyweight division of Bellator is the best light heavyweight division of the sport. And clearly that's not true, but you can't ignore him, right? You can't outright dismiss him anymore. Dana, I think, called him cute, which was nice. And Scott tweeted about the cuteness after ESPN had tweeted this fighter versus fighter, line them up kind of deal. For me, if there's one fight I can make right now, I feel like it's got to be Bellator's best fighter, which is Patricio Pitbull. And the Khabib fight feels like too much, but he's the best fighter in the world. So there is some intrigue for me there. More intrigue with Patricio fighting Alexander Volkanovski at 145. I think that's a fantastic fight. That's a toss-up fight that either of those guys could or should win. Will be extremely competitive. I also tweeted out Alimale McFarlane against Valentina Shevchenko, because this is a scenario where I think Alimale is more interesting than any fighter the UFC could put up against Valentina. So it's one of those rare cases where you have a fighter that's outside the UFC who maybe doesn't have the resume per se, but she's got a style, an athleticism, and a competitive desire, pedigree that I think gives Valentina trouble, more trouble than necessarily any fighter on the UFC roster.
Right.
And those are the kinds of things that really sort of juice me up and get me going. But we're so far away from, and yet still it's nice to hear once in a while Dana have to address these ideas where he's so transparent and dismissing them and ignoring it doesn't matter. And yet you still have people in the sport. There's this current that runs throughout the sport where it does matter to people who are watching. And that kind of thing still clings to me is something that means a lot. What's your favorite cross promotion memory? Do you have one? Is it when Chuck went to Pride? That's the obvious one for you.
It's the obvious one, and we lived it, right? I mean, we were hardcore at that time, and that was things like that just weren't happening. So it was a big deal. I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, Chuck's going to Pride, you know. And I used to like when fighters finally were able to come over from Shudo and compete in the UFC. Carl Uno,
But those guys were like released by Shudo, and then and Shudo wasn't even. I love Shudo because Shudo's a sanctioning body, right? So Shudo had recognized promoters that would promote Shudo titles, and there was a rankings. It was like a sport, much more than the sport that the UFC is today. Right. And so the best out of Shudo would sometimes then say, okay, I'm moving on and I'm going to go fight and sign a deal with the UFC. Unfortunately, Mas Sakurai had the bad back. Like Kyle Uno was the closest to potentially being number one, I think, out of Shudo, who did well inside the UFC, can never quite get over the hump. But I mean, I'm with you on Chuck and Pride and Dana sitting on the broadcast and Chuck's not following the game plan and all.
That was the best part of the whole thing. Like Dana was his coach, right?
He was, and here's the thing: like that went as poorly for the UFC as possibly could go, right?
Yeah.
What was the negative side effect for the UFC?
Yeah, it didn't matter.
It didn't matter in the end. Yeah. All it did was sort of create a scenario where the UFC participated in one of the great nights and events in the history of mixed martial arts because they were willing to do that. And this weekend was, I know you don't watch a lot of soccer, but this weekend was the biggest sporting event in the world. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. The UEFA
Cornhole Championship on?
No. The UEFA Champions League makes the Super Bowl feel small globally. And it's still massively important. And it's a true competition between the best soccer leagues in Europe. And it's not like you have England and the clubs in England saying, no, we're not going to play the clubs in Spain because we don't want to risk our reputation. We're the Premier League. It's actually like real competition. And I feel like mixed martial arts is missing it. That's the thing that's stopping this thing from being the global sport so many of us want it to be. It's not. Right now, the UFC is a global entertainment property. And people are nipping at their heels trying to get a piece. But it's not a global sports competition. And that's to the detriment, Jeff, and this is a nail I've hammered, but it's to the detriment of mixed martial arts, I feel like. And so these kinds of discussions still warm my soul about what's the big negative. Tell me one negative of why cross promotion should not happen, should not be a discussion, should not be something that enters into our mind, Jeff Sherwood. Why?
Well, I know one thing that goes through Dana's mind, and it's the same thing that's gone through his mind forever. Dana feels that people want to make money off him and his promotion. Dana said that to me many times.
Yeah.
Like, you're making money off of me and the UFC.
Right.
And I think that's what he feels about cross promotion. Oh, they want to cross promote with us because they want to make money off of us, not with us, off of us.
Right.
Because that's how Dana is. Conquer the world, screw everyone else. And that's why it'll never happen. As far as reality, it would be nothing but great. I mean, we see here in the chat, Chandler versus Gagey. We might get that anyways. It would probably be in the UFC.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I mean that was Dana's big thing for years. Oh, you're just making money off us. And that's what everyone wants to do. They just want to make money off of us.
Right.
So that's why he's against it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a super myopic, like closed-minded. This is our world. This is our small little universe. It's the pro wrestling model for mixed martial arts, which in the end, I've always felt, even though the UFC is an enormous success and you've had other pockets of success, it's a limiting principle. It makes the universe smaller. It doesn't expand the sport. We can be marketed to a certain way. We can be told the UFC title is a world title. We can be told the Bellator title is a world title. It's all bullshit. It's not a world title. It's marketed world titles. And, it does, in the end, make it feel less important. And I don't think it does anything negatively to the UFC business. I just don't buy it whatsoever.
Dana wouldn't want to see any of his guys lose. I mean,
yeah. Well, Pitbull wants
Pitbull.
Right?
If Pitbull fights Volkanovski and Pitbull wins, Dana sees that probably as a horrible event.
But it's clearly not based on what we know.
Right. But for him and him making money, that takes a little luster off of Volkanovski, right? He lost to a guy in Bellator. Dana looks down on everyone and everything.
No, I get his perspective. I just think it's wrong. Like, it's literally wrong. It's a self-serving principle, which is fine because he's running a business, and I get it. Like, I understand the reality and the thinking behind why Dana White wouldn't want to do that. But it's not taking away business. You're actually creating events, mega events that didn't exist prior, and you're actually building. I had this argument on Twitter. I think it's actually building credibility in the sport of mixed martial arts. Which, how does that hurt the UFC? I don't see how it hurts the UFC.
But I don't think the UFC's into building mixed martial arts.
Yeah, well,
they're into building the UFC.
Yeah, but
I want to know where Pitbull's going to get $1 million.
He's made way over $1 million in his career. You know that. So it's like,
of course.
Yeah.
A lot of people have made over $1 million. That doesn't mean I can make a bet right now of $1 million.
Well, thank God you can. Yeah. You do it in a second. Pitbull apparently can, and he's happy to do it and put his put your money where your mouth is. You got to respect that.
Yeah. I mean, I would like for somebody to call his bluff.
Who's the guy to do that?
It would have to be Dana.
Yeah, and Alexander Volkanovski's tweeting, "Hey Dana, let's do it. I'm all for it." Right? It was actually like some UFC fighters putting a little onus to this, a little pressure to this. It's kind of nice to see it from that direction, and we shall see what comes of it. Similar cross promotion. Oh, it'll never happen. Oh my God! But you know what the anniversary is today? We're 3 years since Mayweather-McGregor, Jeff, to the day.
3 years. That's
3
amazing.
years. Time flies. 3 years. What if you have like one memory, one takeaway from the event? What is it? Sitting here now, what is the one memory Jeff Sherwood has of that night, of that event? Anything?
All the lead up. All the lead up with McGregor and Mayweather on the stage, and McGregor just throwing some zings out there and just, crossing the line sometimes and straddling the line most of all the other time. And the one shot that McGregor did land was like, oh, whoa. I mean, even though, we go into that fight, I went into that fight, there's no way Conor McGregor is going to win that fight. No way. But I will admit, when Conor did land that one left, I kind of scooted up on the edge of my seat and I was like, whoa.
You got excited. You're like, oh my God, he landed a punch.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty sad when that was accomplishment. He landed one clean shot. But I liked the lead up to the whole thing. I mean, I thought that was actually better than the fight. Actually.
Yeah, no, in a thousand different ways, and they promoted an event. I did a live hit. I think it was Sky Sports right after the match itself, and I feel exactly today the way that I did in the immediate aftermath. Mayweather carried him. It was a waste of a time in terms of a competitive contest. There was, very little intrigue. It's the kind of contest that, even though we're talking about it now, we're reminiscing about it in a way that's like pretty empty. Like, there was no ramification of this contest that will lead out to a longer history. It was a kind of just cotton candy event. It happens, you forget it, and you move on. And, I think sort of just reminiscing about that is about as good as you're going to get. There was no legacy building on that, no nothing. Guys made money, fine. But adding to the history of combat sports or the legacy of Floyd Mayweather or the legendary status of Conor McGregor, I mean, really, it wasn't worth much. I think they could fight every year between now and 2050, and it would be the same contest, same fight.
Well, boxing wise, now if anyone was ever going to do this again, I would like to see it 1-1.
Yeah, no, I wrote that, and I
mean,
wrote that. I had a whole plan for this, Jeff. No one listened to my plan. I'm like I don't know why, because they would all make a lot of money, and the world would be captivated by it. Yeah, you go 1-1-1, right? So we get to the boxing, we do the MMA. Now, if Floyd wins the MMA, we're done. If Conor wins the MMA contest, then we got to flip a coin for one last fight. Heads boxing, tails MMA. You get then we sort of really get this picture here of some kind of combat sports history. But of course,
story, right? A story.
A historic event, story, whatever it is. But of course, that's not what we're going to get. It's just I hope we never see it again because it's just a pure money grab. And it doesn't mean anything. And I'm glad that Manny Pacquiao's guys are like, why would we fight Conor McGregor? Like, what is the point? Conor should go back to the UFC and fight in the UFC. That's where he made his name and his millions and his people care about him. He's getting lapped now by the field because they're continuing to compete, and he's hanging out on beaches in southern France, not doing anything. And it's a little disappointing, but he made his money, and so be it.
I miss him.
You miss him.
I miss him. I miss him in the UFC. We all have to agree that when he's fighting in the UFC, when he's in the mix, it's a little more exciting, regardless.
Sure.
So even if it's just the talk, it doesn't even have to totally come down to the fighting, but just the talk and the hype and things like that is worth it. So he needs to come back.
Yeah. Along those lines, a guy who sort of flirted in the public with infamy and fame and fighting. Just very briefly, I want to touch on Jason Mayhem Miller. He's someone that you've known for a long time. Similar, likewise, always troubled, I think is a fair word, way to understand what his deal was. Someone who just didn't really give any care, any appreciation to regular social order. He was Mayhem Miller, right? He just did what he wanted. Whatever controversy followed him, he created controversy. He was also a part of some really heinous acts, some criminal acts. And yet, like 2 months ago, he surfaces, or 3 months ago, he surfaces, and he gets some press here, and he gets some press here. And, it's almost like rehabilitating your image, kind of, sort of. And I think the media needs to take more care in how they do these things, because they elevate these kinds of people to give them platforms to say all these sorts of things about redemption, and they never live up to it. Almost never live up to it. And here we have now the case of Mayhem Miller running afoul of the law. Guys like this, and Mayhem in particular, what do you think the sport owes them in terms of notoriety? Is he someone that should be talked about? Is he someone that we should really pay attention to, whether he's competing or not? How do you see characters like Mayhem Miller in the mixed martial arts story?
Well, he's definitely part of the history. I mean, George St. Pierre, Jason's been doing it for a long time, or had been doing it for a long time. And really, in the end, it's a sad story. Like you said, me and Jason had gotten pretty close over the years. I used to see him all the time, and we used to talk all the time. And I was actually talking to him when they were getting ready when they raided his house. I was talking back and forth with him while they were outside of his house. And, Jason's got a lot of demons, and they go way back to when he was a small child. And you just really feel sorry for a person like that, but at some point you have to quit feeling sorry for them, and if they don't want help, what can you do? It's never going to change. So it's just a tragic event. Jason Mayhem Miller's whole life has kind of been tragic. It's sad. It's very sad. And for anyone, I mean, obviously Jason was in the spotlight a little bit, he was on MTV and doing his show on there and stuff. So he was a little more popular than a lot of guys. And, when you're watching the TV show, you really had no idea about the real Jason Mayhem Miller. But it always came out. in the end. Sooner or later, it always came out. Everything, his whole, if you look back at all the things that have happened to him and all the things that he's done over the years, like it's just a matter of time before he explodes again. And here we go again. And it's a sad situation.
Yeah, I think sometimes people look at him and it's like, oh, it's an act, but he's given so many examples, and we understand his story, his life story, enough to know, no, this is not an act. This is a troubled person who doesn't really have the means to control himself, and that doesn't absolve him of anything. Jason's a pretty. Sometimes he can be an introspective person. You can talk to him, and like that there's someone inside there who's actually like working something out, but there's a lot of confusion and a lot of unfortunate sort of.
I used to be able to tell.
Yeah,
like when I was talking to him on different days, I would be able to tell his good days and his bad days, or if he was off his medication. Like I can tell right away, and we had conversations about it and stuff. So. It's just like I said, it's sad because who knows what could have happened. I'm not saying Jason Mayhem Miller would have been a UFC champion or anything like that, but the end of his story or his career could have definitely been a lot different than this, for sure.
Could have been. We're still in the midst of it, and we'll see how it transpires for him. I mean, he's got a lot of life in front of him, presumably and hopefully. So, that's a tough one. But again, I think there's like a lesson here for, media people, whether they take it to heart or not. But it's like when people like this come back into the limelight, when they've taken a step back. It's so easy to give them that platform to allow them a chance to say, "Hey, I'm going to follow the rules now." Mm-hmm. Like I'm redemption story, and it doesn't, that doesn't make it so. And you really have to watch people, what they do versus what they say. And I get that, like, that story is good and it's easy to tell and people enjoy that. And like, people are hopeful and they want the best for others. But at a certain point, you have to say, well, there's enough of a history here to say you are not going to have a redemption story. And so perhaps we should refrain from talking about you or giving you the time of day until you actually prove it, and that's a hard thing, but I think people should pay attention to that.
Yeah, remember when we went to Hawaii? It was me and you, and we spent time with them, and that was like one of the first times that he had gotten in trouble. Remember, he went over to his ex-girlfriend's house, kicked the door down, whatever, and that was shortly when me and you sat and had lunch with him. That was not very far away from that. And, we talked about that a little bit, but,
and that was how that was legit like 15 years ago, right? I mean, how that was forever. So, this is a pattern. This is not an isolated incident.
No,
this is someone who, what you're getting. If you're giving someone that platform, you really have to be aware of what they're saying and how they're saying it and who they're saying it to, and giving them that access.
But at the same time, you got to realize a lot of these guys are just in it for the story. It's kind of TMZ-ish, right? I mean, it's kind of how a lot of the media has turned to. Like, you're more of a hardcore journalist where these guys are looking for clicks, right? I mean, you're going to put a story up and people are going to read it regardless. You don't have to, sensationalize a certain incident or a person or anything like that. But if somebody on a small website, gets a interview with Jason Mayhem Miller and he says some crazy things and they throw it on their website, it's going to get traffic.
Yeah.
So that's why they fall into that trap.
Small or large, I just, just something to consider, because there's a lot of hard stories in mixed martial arts, and there's a lot of opportunities. People come knocking on your door saying, "Hey, I got a redemption story for you," and you can end up giving time to someone who is claiming certain things and then totally lives counter to that, and they're going to come knocking on your door again. So just beware of that. There are fights, of course, this weekend. I think the UFC is on every weekend between now and 2057. Yeah. Which, hey, more power to them. And I don't think, we're recording on a night where the world in sports shut down. The athletes across the board, NBA, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, all said, hey, we are not competing tonight, and it's indefinite. We're not competing. I don't think that the fighters in the UFC would do that. It's a different sport, different conversation. The president of the company is about to tomorrow night speak for the president of the United States at a national political convention. And, I just feel like UFC is intentionally obtuse in terms of like these political issues, and they're not going to dive into it. They don't, even though you have Dana White advocating, it's not a situation where if people want to take a step back and say, I'm not fighting. It's not like these other leagues that will stand by the athletes because, that seems like the right thing to do. They're going to do what they want to do, and that's promote. We're going to give our product away to ESPN, and they're going to pay us for it, and people are going to watch or not watch, and that's the reality of it. But I say that setting up the fight card this weekend, and I don't know that the athletes competing for the UFC this weekend necessarily have to make a statement or make a stand. But if they do, they would be in lockstep with other athletes. I think not making a stand sort of makes them, again, sort of separate from the rest of the sports world. And that's interesting with the timing and the understanding of what's going on right now. There are good fights nonetheless. And as I said off the top, sort of give a bit of a distraction from what's happening in the world to focus on what the fighters are doing these days. No question about it. I think the light heavyweight main event adds to this discussion about the 205 weight division, all the parity that's happening there. Anthony Smith and Alexander Rakic, that's a good fight. That's a quality fight. I think that is a fight that's right in line with Ryan Bader and Vadim Nemkov. I think you throw in a bunch of guys that can be completely competitive against one another. But this has a lot to do with how the UFC light heavyweight division shakes out. Smith looked great last time. Rakic is a guy who I think has a ton of talent, trying to regroup. How do you see this contest, Jeff?
Well, I think Anthony Smith's proven that he's a good fighter. I'm not sure if he's a great fighter. He's been fighting for a long time. He's got a lot of wear and tear. Not that he's done or not any good or anything, but I'm not saying that Anthony Smith will ever be a champion or anything, but he's a good quality fighter. And Rakic is the same. You look at their records, and it's kind of crazy because Rakic lost his very first fight of his career and his last fight. So I'm just wondering. I'm going by opponents, and even though Ozdemir, man, I want Ozdemir to be better. And I think I'm finally coming to the conclusion that he's not going to be. But, Rakic lost to him. So I think this fight is kind of a toss-up. And anytime that I feel a main event is a toss-up, that's a good main event in my eyes. Because we don't really know what's going to happen. I could see both of these guys winning this fight.
Oh, no question.
And I enjoy a fight like that.
Yeah, no, that's what you want, right? You want competitiveness. You want parity.
That doesn't always happen.
No, of course it doesn't always happen. That's why you want it, right? Because it doesn't always happen. And like when it does happen, you have to recognize it. So this is a quality fight. Clearly, Anthony Smith, that win from Gustafsson didn't translate against Glover Teixeira, and he got stopped in a pretty bad way. That was a contest where people were saying, oh, my God, he almost got killed. And this was the fight where his teeth were coming out. And so he's got a lot of questions to answer against Rakic. And, that's – I think coming off your first loss against Volkan Ozdemir, split decision, again, the UFC, this fight makes sense for their division. The winner gets to, again, sort of be a part of that conversation. And I do think it's extremely tight, 50-50 kind of contest. And that's the fights you want to see. The card also includes the return of Robbie Lawler taking on Neil Magny. Lawler taking the fight on shorter notice. Always good to see Ruthless Robbie Lawler compete, right? And I think it feels like his title time is done, that the time at the top of the 170 division is done. But, crafty Robbie Lawler is still a fun Robbie Lawler to watch fight. And Neil Magny presents all sorts of problems. He can slow you down, grapple with you, tie you up, outstrike you, beat you a bunch of different ways. This feels like the kind of fight where that's going to happen, where Robbie's going to get tied up. He's not going to be able to dictate. Neil Magny finds a way to grapple or win or mix striking and grappling and beating Robbie Lawler. That's how I'm seeing it. Do you agree with that?
Well, that's what I think needs to happen if Magny's going to get the win here. He's got to do some dirty boxing and keep him close, keep Robbie close, because when you let Robbie, throw bombs, if you get hit with those bombs, eventually you're going to get hurt. So, Magny's 6'3", 6 foot. He's a tall guy, much taller than Robbie. I don't even think Robbie's 6 foot. So I would think Robbie's more like 5'11", 5'11", 5'10", something like that. So yeah, Magny's got to keep the fight close, but he could also keep Robbie away with his length. But eventually, if you don't tie Robbie up every time he gets close to you, he's going to catch you. But we are seeing a little bit of a different Robbie Lawler at this point. He's coming off 3 losses in a row. So I was a little surprised that Robbie would take a fight on short notice at this point. But I guess maybe everyone figures when they take a short notice fight like Robbie Lawler is that they're going to win that fight. But like you said, there's some matchup problems here for both of them, and they have to overcome that. That's how you win fights, and I agree with you. Neil Magny's going to have to control the distance or keep it real close.
Yeah, I think one of the fighters to fight to watch on the card, a rematch from February when Ian Kataluba lost to Magomed Ankalaev. This is another light heavyweight contest that I think has some ramifications, people sort of figuring where they fit in the light heavyweight class. It's a situation where, I think this is a fight to watch, basically. I mean, I feel like we talked a little bit more depth on this UFC card, and this one fits right in that. Any other fighter or matchup on the event, Jeff, that piqued your interest?
Alexa Grasso is always fun to watch.
Yeah.
So that's what I start doing when there's no other fights that really stick out like matchups to me. I look for other fighters that I enjoy watching fight. Ricardo Lamas, we've watched so many great fights that Ricardo Lamas has been in, going back to the WEC days. Tough as nails, hits hard, good fighter. Bruce Leroy, you never know, right? Sometimes looks like a world beater, and other times looks like nothing. But that's kind of what I'm looking at. But the last 3 fights are definitely 3 fights. Last 4 fights, 5. Main card's good.
Yeah, it's a nice night of fights for the UFC, and that train keeps rolling on. Again, thank you to people spending their time to watch this, subscribing to our page. Appreciate it. We know that there's so much out there and so much to be consumed by. So, for a little bit of a distraction, and we share a story that's funny once in a while, and you enjoy it, that means everything. Jeff, any other thoughts before we sign off for the week?
Well, we do know that Bobby Razak trains UFC, because every time he comes in here, that's what he writes.
Yeah.
So he wants us to know that.
Yeah, I was trying to ignore Bobby. Just really trying to ignore him. But reminds me, if you got comments that we want to put on the show, please do that. You can do it on the Periscope or the YouTube. We appreciate incorporating that kind of stuff. For Jeff Sherwood, I am Josh Gross. You've been watching the MMA Outsiders. We'll catch you next week. Hope you're well.